Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So it's the full moon of August 23rd, 2021. And it's the full moon by our Thai calendar, Thai monastic calendar. This time of year is the traditional monsoon rains retreat. It's the 3 months from full moon of July through the full moon of October. So it's a lunar calendar. So we're 1 month in to the rains retreat, the Basa. So we're 1/3 of the way. Some of us have already had our period of solitary retreat, which is a tradition that we hold here. Most of our monasteries in the West, in the Northern Hemisphere. Not sure about the Southern Hemisphere. But taking, as an individual, taking periods of solitude, practicing in solitude, gives us the opportunity to explore practice in a more individual, solitary way, not having to follow the routines. Of course, our monastic rule doesn't change, that remains the same, so we still have the duty of following the Vinaya, the monastic code. Still need to attend the fortnightly recitation of the monastic rule. That's not an option. That's a steady practice. Has nothing to do with whether we're in solitude or not. As long as if we're living close enough to attend those things with other monastics. So that's what we did this morning. All of the monastic community. And in this tradition of meeting on these lunar nights to practice together. And people on retreat aren't required. Some are here, some aren't, most aren't. That's our individual choice. But people that aren't on retreat, we're all gather to come together as a community, practicing communally, in harmony, chanting, sitting together quietly. And then on nights like this where there's a Dhamma reflection offered, to listen to someone reflect on practice, on Dhamma. So for all of us that are in the room, we were here for the chanting, chanting outdoors in the courtyard there, the sacred garden. Perhaps people that had dialed in early enough online to also see that, hear that. And the chanting that we did is, it's one of my, it sounds funny to say favorites, because it sounds a little bit facile, but It is one of my favorite reflective chants. It's in the Pali and the English, so it means that I can understand, because I'm not particularly versed in Pali language, because we have so many wonderful translations, and so to hear line by line, to chant line by line, these very, very core teachings of the Buddha, I find that particular chant very helpful. I really appreciate it when those, especially if I've if I've been chanting it regularly, a lot, is it those phrases echoing through the mind during the day, during the evening. And they pop up, maybe some single line or single phrase or a few words will pop up. And then I can reflect on that. And so then, here in Britain, on the BBC, there's a long-running radio program called Desert Island Discs. And they say, what would you take to your desert island if you were stranded on your own? And then at the end, because they ask, okay, it's around music. And then they say, so if you had to choose one, I can't remember how many pieces of music. It's been a long time since I've listened to it, obviously, as a monk. But they say, okay, if you could only take one piece of music, which one would you take to your desert island disc? Or take to your desert island with you? And for me, they said, what chant would you take? You've got, out of your 5 chants, which one would you take? I think I'd probably choose this one. Either that one or the funeral chanting that we do, that goes through all the basic teachings. And then I would have this reflective tool, and even if it was the only chant that I could remember. So it walks us through, after paying homage to the Triple Gem, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, it says, having heard the teachings, we know this. And then it starts into Dhamma. It's no longer praising and paying homage. It's actually, okay, having heard the teachings, we know this. Birth is dukkha. Aging is dukkha, and death is dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Association with the disliked, dukkha. Separation from the liked, dukkha. Not getting what we want, not getting what we wish, dukkha. And then there's a line that says, in brief, the 5 focuses of identity are dukkha. And this is referring to this very pivotal, very key teaching around the khandhas. And my understanding is that that's what the word they're using there, focuses. There's different ways of looking at the Pali word khandha. And I'm not going to go into a Pali lesson here, because I'm not able to speak like that. But khandhas can often referred to as heaps or sections. And it's referring to, it's a way of looking at the human experience. It's a way of looking at the human experience, and of being able to reflect on the human experience in orderly is not quite the right word, but in a way that is easily accessible for us. So the 5 focuses or heaps, khandhas: body, or form. Sometimes they'll use the word form, sometimes it's translated as body. And it can refer to both, it can be other forms as well. But in this case, it's definitely around body. The second heap, feelings. Feelings. And in Buddhist context, when we use the word feelings, or in Pali, Vedana, it's really referring just to the feeling tones, 3 different feeling tones. It's not about emotions, that's something else that comes later on. But it's referring to either just, is it pleasant, is it unpleasant, or is it in the middle, neutral, you could call it. In that direct translation would be neither painful nor pleasurable, neither one. But there is definitely feeling. So that's the second one. So you have form, body, feelings, pleasant, painful, neutral. Perception, so the word in Pali, sanya. And it is a direct relationship with the English word sign. It is a directly related, and you can see. So perception, so it's like how we label things, how we see things. So often the famous example is, you're walking along a forest path and you get startled, you see something across the path that you think is a snake, and you jump, wah, something curled up there. And you look a little closer, not moving. Get a little closer, maybe get out your torch if it's a little bit dark, and you find that it's just a piece of old rope curled up on the pathway. So at first, your perception was that it was a snake, and you jumped. You responded as if it was a snake. And then you find out otherwise, and then you're going to respond differently. So sanya is how you perceive things, and it's like in this example, it ain't always what you think it is, especially in the beginning, and not necessarily in the end. So, because you might perceive it to be a snake, maybe it is a snake, but you perceive it to be poisonous, and then find out otherwise. So anyway, there's perception, sanya, labeling things, giving it a name, things that we've agreed to call things. That's the third one. And then the fourth one is variously translated, but what we use this evening in our book is mental formations, so thoughts and emotions. So it's not just thinking, but it's also the compounded emotions. What we would in English often refer to as feelings, or my feelings, when we're talking about sadness, gladness, anger, joy, things like that. So, thinking. And then the last one is in our chanting book we translate vijnanam as sense consciousness. A lot of translations just use the word consciousness, which is correct also. But the reason that our book says sense consciousness is because it is referring to the consciousness through the eye, through the ear, through the nose, through taste, tongue, body. And then in Buddhism we have a sixth sense, and that's the intellect, the mind. So that's referring to the six senses. Now these things, these heaps, I quite like that translation of heaps. And the way my teacher spoke about this, it's a forest monastery. We used to do a lot of work with gravel and of various sizes, and sand and pebbles, and we used to usually go down and get it ourselves. It's the big pickup truck, and they used to have big bins, and sometimes they weren't really separated, and there would be the pile of pea gravel, this size, and then you have this size, and then you have river rock, and then you have sand, and they would be sometimes bleeding into each other a little bit. And so this, I found a very helpful image, is that these 5 heaps aren't completely separate. They, the body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and sense consciousness, they intermingle, and they do depend on each other to varying degrees and to a certain degree. They do, it's like how we perceive things is going to affect the way we think. How we think will affect the way we perceive things. How we feel about certain things that we see will affect. So there are these also they can create little feedback loops and things. So they are related. But to be able to look at them, to have this sort of model, this way of reflecting on the human experience. And we can think of other ways to divide it, and we can actually get quite complicated if we wanted, but I personally find this a very, very helpful way of reflecting on the human experience. So in that chant, it mentions them. First of all, it just lays them out. And saying attachment to form. Vedanu. Attachment to form. Attachment to feeling. Attachment to perception. Attachment to mental formations. Attachment to sense consciousness. That's where the dukkha really arises. That's where the pain of attachment is formed. It's not in having a form or having feelings or perceptions, thoughts, emotions, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, thinking, all of these things. That's not the problem. The problem is the attachment to either, like it says earlier, the attaching when we're associating with something we dislike. As a human being, how can we skim through life, get through life without encountering things that we just don't like? It's impossible. Even the people that have, as I reflected, I think a couple of weeks ago, even the people that have everything, they have everything at their fingertips. And generally that's because of the privilege of wealth, because then you can really control the material world around you. Still suffer. So how, if we can't get through life without associating things that we don't like, then is there no escape from dukkha? Is there no escape from suffering? If we can't, is it possible to get through life without being separated from the light? Impossible. Here again, the same example. No matter how privileged we are, no matter how well we can just get things completely set up, because of this changingness of all things, it's impossible. So I ask the same question. So how can we relate to that in a way where there's not dukkha, pain, suffering? How can we get through life always getting what we want? Not attaining one's wishes is dukkha. Even the Buddha, fully enlightened being, didn't get everything, he couldn't get everything he wanted. When we read, it's like right now we're studying the monastic rule and, reading the origin stories and the background stories of how these rules got created, because that's how the Buddha created the rules, out of situations that arose. He didn't just sit down and write rules. He didn't want to do that. He resisted that. But when things went wobbly and people did strange and curious things, and he would create these things. And so even the people living closest to him would sometimes do, some really egregious things, and fully enlightened Buddha didn't get what he wanted. I'm sure he didn't want that to happen. We're all subject to these 5 khandhas changing, so the body changing, feelings changing, perceptions changing, thoughts, emotions, things that enter our consciousness through eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. Can't control everything, and even when we do, to a certain degree, we can control things to varying degrees, but that's where also it gets to be really hard work. We can suffer even just trying to maintain, get things the way we want it, keep it the way we want it, keep ourselves from losing that. And as I try to remember to point out, is it doesn't mean that we don't put in effort. Really put in effort to look after the body. Look after our emotional world. Look after, how we, perceive things. Check in with people. That's why it's good living with people. We start to get really skewed perceptions and ideas, and we can get a bit off. It's really good to be living with other people, because our spiritual friends are what they refer to in the Pali as Kalyana Mitta. This is I feel the great benefit of living in community, is that we can only get so far off track before hopefully one of our friends will say, "Yeah, it's an interesting idea you got there." That's maybe just check in with people. Or if we're struggling with something, or getting lost in something, somebody, or even if somebody doesn't say anything, we just will see it ourselves because of that mirror of having other people here near us. So body changing, so the 5 khandhas changing. Body, feeling, perception, mental formations, sense, consciousness. And through meditation and through quietude and reflection, we can learn to reflect on these things, and reflect on, to first of all see change, not believe in change, but to actually take a look ourselves. Is this true? Just because we chant it, just because the Buddha said it, he didn't want people to take that as truth. He wanted people to reflect on this. He offered these as reflective teachings, not as dogma. And so to reflect, well, body changing. Okay, body is, in my experience, the easier one. But to really reflect on change. And so if it's all changing, and then if we do see that the nature of all things really truly is to change, is to change. That's nature. Nothing's gone wrong. And I know in my own experiences, and then when things change, it's not as that painfulness it reduces. And when I'm really mindful, then the painfulness is not there. And this is possible for all of us. And that's the work that we're doing, is so that it's not just a momentary, like a minute ago I said, when I'm really mindful. It's not just occasional. So then the way I think about it is that the fully awakened being, it's not occasional. They're fully tuned in, no longer fooled by the heart and mind that tries to cling to things, or is fooled and is suffering over change. No longer suffering over that. We can endure the changing feelings, no longer just seeking pleasurable feelings, pleasant feelings, basing our life on pleasantness. It's endless. That's a real dead end, as far as I can see. I know, because I've tried. Just always trying to get what we want, get things set up the way we want. Completely minimize anything painful or unpleasant through self-centered activity. Here again, it doesn't mean we don't try. We don't just roll over and just let life roll over us and say, well, it doesn't matter anyway. It's all changing. No, I mean, it's like just looking around the monastery. Every week, Saturday morning, we all get together, as many of us as possible that are available, to take care of this Dhamma hall, this meditation hall, clean it, repair it. Dan, the caretaker, he goes and looks in the book, the red book, the repair book, and repair things. We take care of our rooms, we take care of our dwellings, we take care of our clothes, we take care of our body, take care of each other. But we do it, the more and more we reflect on this, and the more and more we see, we can do it with wisdom, and we can do it with knowing that you can only do so much. You do what you can. You do what you can, and then when things change anyway, it's only so much. So seeing that impermanent nature. So if we could make things permanent, if we could get everything the way we want it, right? And you could freeze it where you want it. I wonder whether it would actually be satisfactory. We'd probably just get bored. I don't know. Because we can't do that, I haven't experienced it obviously, but would we just get bored? And I mean, this is in a way the way I look at, when you do get things the way you really want it, or you get given that object of your desire, or you get the dwelling, your dream hut in the forest, or the community is exactly the way you want it. There's nobody here that you don't maybe resonate with everyone, and then I wonder, how long it would be before either boredom or if somebody else changed, just that little bit, and something changes, or they build another hut in the forest that's even better than the one you've got, and that's the one you want, or something. I don't know. This is how advertising works, right? You get iPhone 12, and then 6 months later they come out with iPhone 13. So, change. And when I first really started to hear this teaching and begin to reflect on it, I was still living out in the world, layman. I was still working, and I spent about a good year actively looking for something permanent. Just really looking not just with my eyes, but just thinking, well, what about that? That doesn't change. And then you look a little deeper, and oh no, it's changing. The Himalayas, they're not changing. Oh no, they're changing. The universe, no, they say it's expanding. Stars being born, stars dying. And I remember hosting a school group, really lovely school group, very bright, and we were exploring this, and it was interesting to hear there. I'd say, can anybody name something permanent? It was very interesting. Hearing, and then we would investigate that as a group, and in the end, we couldn't find anything. And so this is reflecting like this I find a very helpful way. It's very simple, but then it's gut knowledge or insight knowledge, vipassana, seeing clearly into phenomena. It's not just listening to the chanting, doing the chanting, reading a book, reading a Dhamma book, believing in change, but you just keep looking. And my investigations didn't end after that year, obviously, but I remember that first year especially just really, really focusing in on it. It was so helpful. So this is where also it starts to me at least, for me at least, starts to fold into the further along that chant. It goes through the same list, body, feeling, perception, mental formations, sense consciousness, but looking at the empty, not self nature. So body is not self, feeling not self, and so on and so forth. And this can be, I know for myself, this has been the more challenging aspect of the teaching to reflect on or come to grips with. But if everything's changing, what can we really truly call ours? If this body is changing, and maybe we have studied in biology that physiology, that the body sheds all its cells every 7 or 8 years and is completely replaced and constantly changing. Or we look at photographs of ourselves from last year, 10 years ago, or baby pictures or whatever, and go, all right, it's me, but is that me? So looking at the body, so at one point, what point in life is that a permanent self? So it's not saying that there's nothing there, and it's not saying that this body isn't conventionally speaking mine. It's not yours. But conventionally speaking, in the way we use language, and it's convenient for me to say, yeah, this is me. When my legs hurt, like I tweaked my knee the other day, and it's my knee that's hurting, not your knee. But ultimately, when you actually look at it in the bigger sense, is that I don't own the body as well. Because if I did, my knee wouldn't hurt. I'd be able to really control if it was really well and truly mine, or it wouldn't age, it wouldn't get sick. If it was well and truly mine, these things, all the things that come together at this point in time, all the food that I've eaten over these last 7, 8 years have formed this body here, right now. It's constantly changing. The 4 elements, solidity, fluidity, heat, and the air, wind element coming together, 4 great elements to form this body right now. And if those, and then the causes and conditions for that, I was born, obviously conceived by my parents, and I was born, and this body is, it's dying. That's what bodies are doing. Yeah. Sounds pretty morbid, sorry about that. But at some point it will die. That's what all things that are created do. Anything born will die. And so, feelings, so pleasant, painful, neutral, these are feeling tones. I can't really claim them as mine. There's this not self nature. It's not my feeling, although I'm experiencing it. What I call me or I'm experiencing that. And constantly changing. At one point is this well and truly me? So if these 5 heaps are a way of talking about the body or viewing, or no, not the body, but a human being, if this is one way of looking at it, it's always changing. So am I going to identify only when I'm having pleasant feelings? Oh, that's me. This is myself. Because I'd really like to be identified as being experiencing pleasantness, and then that affects my sankharas, and then I have pleasant emotions. No, it's changing. So, same with perceptions. How many times have I had the wrong perception? I keep fooled again, misperceive something. We get tricked, we start to attach to what we think is right and true, and our view, our opinion, our perception is the right one. And in some ways it might be the quote-unquote right one. It's not to say that we're always wrong, but it's still a perception. And right here in England might not be right in Japan. Right within the monastery might not be right in a school setting or a business setting, or these are agreements, common agreements. Mental formations, my thinking, how my thinking has changed over the years. So at what point, can I call it really myself? This is who I am. This is what I am. And then what if my thinking completely changes around something? So what happened to me? Where did I go? Sense consciousness. Yeah, this is, in a mundane level, this is my eye, this is my ear. But temporary, you have eyes, you have ears, we're hearing the same sounds, but the way we're processing these sounds are different. So how people hear my words, how people related to the chanting that we did earlier this evening, we'll have different perceptions around that. We'll have different feelings around that. Different thinking around that. All of us sitting here now, our body's going to feel different. Different feelings. So the way I like to look at not self is that, it's not saying that there's nothing. As I said a little bit earlier, a few minutes ago. There's something, but it's not usually what we think it is. And it's not solid. It's a changing, it's a process. There's this process going on. The process of the body aging, the process of feelings changing, so on and so forth, down the whole list. The process of the 6 senses, the 6 sense bases. So the bases are what we call the physical ear, and the function of hearing. Then you've got sound, you've got sights, you've got smells, things like that. Food that we taste or whatever. But my eye's changing. I didn't wear glasses 15 years ago. Every couple of years, or 2, 3, 4 years, these lenses change because my eyes are changing. Our hearing faculty changing. sensitivity of the senses changing. So I find by reflecting like this, then also the experience of being a human being for however long this is going to last, it kind of loosens up. I can be more fluid and at ease with the changing conditions of the body. So this is where the anicca, or change, and the not-self nature, they're folded in. And they're these closely related, they fold in together. Because of change, and if we can really tune into change, then we can experience the five heaps, the five khandhas. We can experience human life, human condition, in a more and more relaxed, spacious way. Not clinging to the ideas of who and what I am. Because when we cling, it hurts when it changes, and it is changing. So the things that we can't see, like the ideas we have of ourselves, our identity, body is physical. You can really see that. But when we start to get into that realm of who and what we think we are, clinging to identity, trying to change our identity is a form of clinging as well. So to be fooled by the idea that by trying to get rid of our perceived bad habits or is a good thing, it's still clinging. It's clinging to the idea that we have to change to be whole. And once again, that doesn't mean that we don't try and change maybe unwholesome habits. Yeah, try and change. But we need to be really circumspect how we do that. To really keep an eye out for that grasping, clinging element that might be present. So that's where the hook is that it's not having a body, having feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and sense bases. It's the problem. Here, go back to what I was saying, I think near the beginning of the talk. It's the clinging. So we release our grip. We put in effort without clinging. We put in, and then that's where right effort comes in. Putting in the right effort with circumspection, with discernment, or with what people refer to as wisdom, wisdom factor, panya. Hang on where it's like the simile I use is like a ladder. If you put a ladder, we use a lot of ladders around here. So not all of us necessarily, but when you climb up a ladder, hang on tight to each rung. Grip. But we know that to go anywhere, we need to let go. and sometimes, and obviously you don't want to let go too soon. You need to grab onto the next rung, and then you release. But there's a fluidity to it. You're holding on when it's necessary, and you're releasing when it's necessary. Same with the feet. And then when we get to the top, if we're going up on the roof, for instance, at the back of the vihara, to go up and clean the skylights and empty the gutters of leaves, we fully let go, and then we're free to do what's necessary. We don't walk around with the ladder in one hand. So it's knowing how to hold on to things, how long to hold on to them, how to hold them without suffering, or it's like holding anything that's sharp. There's as you know, I just came back from California 1 month ago, and there's a particular tree that produces a nut, and I've gone totally blank. It's the name of the tree now. But anyway, it's not really the point. But the point is that it produces it, but it's in this very prickly outer casing. Super prickly. It's just all these very sharp needles. And as they dry, they burst open and then the nut comes out. And so when you pick those up, and you can pick them up carefully, and carry, I could, if I had wanted to, I could have carried it back to my mother's house and said, "Oh, look, these are falling off the tree again." I didn't do that, but I could. But if I'd picked it up and held it tight, it would have been really painful. It would have drawn blood. But I could have actually handled it without pain. I could have handled it carefully, knowing that grasping would cause pain and damage. And so this is what we can learn from life, is that we can learn through experience, through reflection, how to hold our experiences with discernment, how to hold it in a way that's not painful for ourselves and others. And this particular teaching of this aspect of the chanting that we did this evening, the 5 khandhas, is a very useful tool. And there's many teachings that the Buddha gave, reflecting on the 5 khandhas and how to different angles of trying to penetrate, and really develop that discernment that's needed to realize non-suffering. And that's the whole goal. Non-suffering. Experience the joys, the sorrows, the pains, the pleasures, the change, life, and get through our experience of life, of at this moment. We're all human beings, and to get through that and not suffer. Experience pain, but not suffer. Experience joy, and not cling where we suffer. And so, I think that's enough for tonight. I'll offer that as a reflection.